Welcome to the virtual SOF team room. Herb Thompson, my fiance Corrie Burton next to me. As we go through here, if you aren't familiar with the team room, we hosted our first one back in November of 2021, shortly after the withdrawal of Afghanistan. I bet we all remember that. There was a huge need. Kaylee, some others were talking of an honest conversation, just like we used to have in the team rooms. For some of us may still be in the team rooms. And this is a place to do it. Have this honest conversation amongst family that has went through over 20 years of this global war on terror across the Middle East and Afghanistan. It's been a place for frank and candid conversations with great leaders, Lieutenant General Nagata, CZ Cologne, the soon-to-be retiring SEAC, Bill Tefford, retired Command Sergeant Major, and others. But tonight we're going to talk about transition from service and many of the aspects that come with it. So it's not just a one thing, hey, let's get out. It's actually a complex topic. So we're going to address it from a few different areas and have you a part of the conversation. When you leave here, hey, you should have learned something. If you did not learn something when you were here, you maybe your microphone wasn't working or your speakers weren't working, because we have some great speakers dialed up for you to listen to here, but also to engage. This first part will be a part where we just kind of talk and have a talk, but throughout the rest of it, you can engage, use the chat, fill it up. If we see a good question in there, we'll pop it up. We'll have a chance for people to come off and mute and actually be a part of the conversation. So it's not just you sitting there, but we're going to kick it off with, in a moment, a couple minutes, Scott and Monty Mann, two of our favorite people, not just in the Special Forces community, but on this thing called Earth. Based upon what they're doing and being authentic leaders in our community. If you do not know them, they lead a nonprofit that's helping many of our brothers and sisters. The play Last Out, if you haven't seen that, sponsored by the Gary Sinise Foundation. Scott's going up to Sioux Falls, South Dakota in a couple weeks to do another iteration of that. It is just an impactful journey. Corrie and I saw it when it was here in DC, and it just something special. I don't care if you like theater or not, you will be moved if you go to see that. And Scott also wrote Operation Pineapple Express. Many of you on the call probably played a role in helping get out some of our allies that were left behind, and quite frankly are still left behind, and Scott's still leading the fight as we go through there.
And if I may give a huge shout out to the work that Monty does, because I know all too often we as spouses are these biggest supporters of those that are out doing the frontline work. So Monty is actually the producer of Last Out. And we like to say Scott's calendar keeper, like I'm Herb's handler. So she and I conversed on that. I'm sure all of you spouses can relate.
Exactly. Unsung heroes that we don't say enough about. Those Scott and I attempt to. Scott does a little better than I do. But as we go forward after that conversation, we'll have a few shorter conversations with some guests here. Our first one's going to be focused on networking, building the network before you need it, with Danielle Hance from the Catalyst Foundation and Dave Lucas. Shout out to Fifth Group there. I know Dave just left, but that's important for those folks out there that are Fifth Group. Everyone else, we love you, but just not as much. And then you also got David Simmons, a former 18 Delta with the group Return to Duty, talking about chronic back pain. Holler if you have back pain. That's probably all of us. So it'll be a good conversation there. And then to round out the sprint, as we talk about transition, a couple of things that all of us need is more time and more money. And Sarah Bumgarner from AFMA is going to talk about us and our money. But seriously,
wait, is she talking about life insurance? That might be important.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Why are you planning to kill me?
No, keep going.
Oh, she's always asking for me to have more life insurance, and I don't know.
Snapped watchers out there? No, I'm just kidding.
Then about 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to come back together. We will do a little wrap up. What are some key takeaways from all the conversations that happened? We will give you a chance to, throw some questions in the chat, come off of mute and ask us some questions, and have a little discussion to round us out there. But here's where the real conversation is going to start. It's why we're here, the first one with Scott and Monty. So without further ado, I just want to, say welcome to Scott and Monty. Corrie and I couldn't be happier to be doing this with you. Like I said, two of our favorite people. And good evening. Where are you calling in from, Scott and Monty? Because I know you're not at home.
No, we were sitting out on the back porch of a VRBO up in the mountains of Western North Carolina in Hot Springs. And that's the nearest town. It's probably like 30 miles from here. But yeah, we're just kicking it up in the mountains for a week.
No, I love it, Scott. I think we'll dive into. I want to go back a little bit, and when you got out, when you transitioned out of the military, what was your mindset like? And then second to that, I'll ask Monty, like, how she kind of was a part of that.
Yeah, we were just talking about this today, in fact, as we were looking at our for-profit and our nonprofit business and kind of the miles that we've run. It was 10 years ago when I retired in 2013. I'd done about 23 years almost in service, and about 18 of that as a Green Beret. And when I retired, honestly, I felt like everything was exactly where it needed to be. My mindset was actually, I'm leaving at the time that's the right time to leave. My dad always told me, you'll know when it's the right time. And I felt like it was. I had just wrapped up a third tour in Afghanistan. I had a book I wanted to write about village stability operations. My boys were still, I have 3 boys, Monty and I do, and they were still in school. And Monty and I had been looking so forward to just getting on with another phase of our life, because we had been apart so much and had lived, like so many of you, this long existence post 9/11. And so my mindset was really good. I felt really optimistic about everything, and really felt like I had a good plan. I had some good contract jobs lined up, but I don't know, it was probably about 10 or 15 days after I took off the desert boots and donned the Tampa flip-flops that like everything just changed dramatically. And what my old buddy Dave Phillips from 5th Group Vietnam era Green Beret calls the snakes in the head, they started crawling pretty hard. And I started to go through kind of a bit of a spiral. My transition was not good at all. And it was mostly around my own mental health, my own perception of myself, my own identity. I know we'll get into that, but it that old saying that no plan survives the first contact with the enemy, like that was absolutely my transition. Everything that I thought, and everything looked great on the outside. I was traveling around the country, doing contract work and doing some engagements and even trying to figure out how to be a speaker and that kind of thing. But on the inside, man, I was a wreck, and it was starting to show up at home.
One of the pieces of your play, I know it's written around a character, but I know that both of you said there were pieces that were reflective of your own experiences. And I know the spouse at one point was really struggling with trying to fix something for the character as he was struggling. So Monty, I'd love to know, was that a reflection of your time as you're starting to see Scott struggle? Were you anxious? How did you navigate that as a supportive spouse?
I think that first part you told me today.
Yeah, well, I mean, going back to kind of what Scott was saying, as far as when he first got out of the military, in my mind, this is going to be great. I just go on about everything I've always done. He's just going to be home more now. He's going to go into this contracting job he's excited about. This is going to be awesome. And so I just kept doing everything like what I've always done. And then he was kind of doing his thing, but I was watching him just go down, 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 down. I mean, his mood, his everything, to the point he'd walk into a room, the boys would get up and leave because you never knew what version of Scott you were getting. And I was kind of starting to feel that way. And that was making me even more so want to go kind of just keep doing my thing and he'll figure it out. Because in my mind, he was the one transitioning, wasn't me transitioning. He was just changing jobs and I was going to keep doing like what I'd always been doing. So as it kept getting worse and worse, I think that's when we actually finally had a conversation. And at that point, it's like, what can I do to actually help with this? Because this is not going how either one of us thought it was going to go. And we came together and actually communicated about it. And at that point, it's like, well, maybe I could do this to help you. And maybe I could do that. And when we actually got a plan together, and then both of us were actually going through transition together as a team, that's when everything changed for us.
But not before it, and I'll just end with this, is for me, it got as dark as it can get.
Bad.
Like, and I'm just
Really
being
bad.
candid. Like it got as close to the end of it as it could get for me. It
took that for us to
took
finally
that
kind of have a conversation.
and for her to pick my ass up off the floor about 7 or 8 times, literally. before we started to reattack and reapproach how we were doing it. So I don't want to I want to make sure that it got bad before it got better.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think watching you on Fox News, CNN, wherever, or seeing us on LinkedIn or wherever, some event, there's this myth that like, oh, everything's perfect in life and they didn't have any struggles. And I know we had a very important part that I'll have Corrie hit on here in a minute, but what was it like for you, Scott, in that moment to be like, oh, Monty's your teammate and she's going to help you? Could you dive into that at all a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the part for me was that, like Monty said, I had always handled the aspect of my journey. That was my job. And her job was to handle the aspect of her journey. And then we would come together where it made sense in our military journey together. And we had kind of sort of figured that out, or at least operated that way. And then when I got into the civilian world, it was like I had changed planets. I had gone from this world that's an honor-based culture where everything you do is for your team. And then I had transitioned to this new planet where everything is individual based. And, I looked around and I didn't know how to navigate it all. And I'd lost my connection to my identity and my purpose. And again, Monty and I we were acting like we were still in the military. We were trying to solve it like we were still in the military, which meant each of us handling our piece of it. And I was failing miserably. So when we did go through that dark period, and there was a point where, I'm an alcoholic too. I've been in recovery for several years. And there's a point where it gets so bad that you just look around and you go, okay, well, I got nowhere to go but up, And that's how it started with Monty and me. And she said, look, why don't I come on? I was starting to speak a little bit at this time and trying to build a speaker business. And she said, why don't I come with you? And let me just look at it and see if I can play a position somewhere in this. And I think that's how it started for us. Was we had no clue what we were doing, but we just started to kind of walk it together.
Yeah, because instead of me just continuing to do what I always did, separate from him, because he was gone so much, and then him starting this new business, we learned how to actually navigate it together. And that's when actually I think both of us felt like things were changing for the better.
And it was probably 2 years of discovery learning.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that together, because Corrie and I had a moment of where early in our relationship, and if you could tell of when I kind of opened my eyes a little bit. I still struggle with this at times, full disclosure, but
I think you're referring to the teammate.
Yeah.
Like the first day that I used the word teammate and put it into his focus, that I was there to help him, much like you, Monty, with Scott, like I'm a pivotal part of your day to day. Let's do this together. I'm your teammate. You had teammates before. I'm your new teammate. And it I think was a very, big moment for him. It was an epiphany of how to react towards me and how to become lock and step. And I think for many service members, that's a struggle as they transition. And when they realize that they can do that alongside their partner, then they're able to really treat it like training with a partner. And I loved what you said about, coming to a new planet. At least once a day, I say, welcome to America to Herb, because things are very different here. So definitely we can relate with that, and love the intentional efforts that you're both taking to walk together.
Allegedly, you're not supposed to use the horn when you drive the car.
Every 5
But
seconds.
I don't know. I thought we were supposed to use it. That's why it's there. But one thing I think is unique actually about both of you and I actually come from Monty and then Scott. You are together all the time.
Mhm.
We're together all the time. We work from home. We do everything together. Far different from when we were in, etc. How is that like with you two? Of like, you're always there with each other.
Real. Monty, how crazy did it drive you that he wasn't putting stuff back where it goes?
We've just always loved our time together. And when he was in the military and gone so much, we always said from the very beginning when he retired that we wanted to do something together so that we could spend time together. And I don't think either one of us actually saw it as being actually a business that we started and we were like literally running together. But when it happened, I love it. I love all the time that we get together, because I don't know, I just feel like we complement each other, and where he, needs some help, and I can help, and where I need some help. It's just such a partnership that we do together that we've learned how to navigate being together all the time.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too, and it's just, it's different for everyone. And I can only speak to my point of view with Monty, but I feel like I didn't marry up, like I married out of my species, and that I've always known that, like I've always kind of felt that way going through the military. And, we've always enjoyed our time together. And that was one thing that we always talked about getting out, was that we were going to create a life by design where we could do that, where we could spend time together in a way that we wanted to, and we didn't have to answer to anybody about that. And that was, even in the dark periods, that was something that we both still felt strong about. And I think that's what kind of got us through it, was that, all right, there's no money right now. We don't have a clue what we're doing, but at least we're doing it together. And that's what we said we wanted to do. It's the only thing that we knew to be true. And and that hasn't changed really at all.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, people finding their purpose and their focus after military. And I think that that's a great, segue to the next part of what we were going to talk about.
Yeah, there was a moment we're at Scott's place. I guess it was 2 months ago, and Scott said, "I'm more fulfilled now than I was when I was in." How is that possible, Scott? Because I feel the same way, but I want to hear from y'all of like, how is that possible to be more fulfilled now than when we were in tip of the spear, saving the world? How is that possible?
I ask myself that a lot. And sometimes I even question myself, like, is that an accurate statement? But I know that it is. And it wasn't always that way in transition. I mean, as we've talked about, like, I went to a very, very dark place in my transition, and I was certainly far from fulfilled. But what happened was, along the way, I met some civilian mentors, and I frankly believe that civilian mentors are critical for finding the next ridgeline in our life. It's not just military mentors, it's civilians. And I met a former NFL football player named Bo Eason. And this dude played football in the 80s. He was a free safety, and he was voted the dirtiest player in the NFL. They said that when this guy hit you, he hit you so hard you smelled smoke. And he blew his knee out for the 7th time, and he became an actor, a playwright, and a storyteller. And the reason he did that, and I was watching him speak at this event when I was trying to figure out what the hell to do with my life. He said they were carrying him off the field after he had blown his knee out for that final time, and he thought to himself, "I'm going to go to prison. If I don't figure out a way to take this TNT that's inside my belly and put it into the world in a positive way, I'm going to go to prison." And when he said that, it was like he had just, like an arrow hit me in the solar plexus. And I felt like the dude was talking straight to me. And as he's telling this story, he's like prowling the stage like a predator. His physicality was amazing. And I just thought that is what I want to do right there. And it was the same feeling that when I was 14 years old and a Green Beret walked into the soda shop in my little logging town, I knew. And so I connected with this dude, and for years he trained me in storytelling. And it was in the journey of storytelling that it opened up a new career for me, a new occupation, and really a relationship with Monty and me that we'd never had. And that's what I mean by that. For me, storytelling gave me a pathway to fulfillment that has frankly surpassed what I did in SF.
And Monty, your background, I think, lends to storytelling. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you may have supported Scott in storytelling?
Like, are you meaning something in particular, or?
No, I just meant in regards to like how you took an interest into, how did you segue into your interest in producing?
Yeah, even like the play and how that started to come about, how you and I worked
Yeah,
together.
well, when we started working on the play, it was originally going to be a one-man show. And so he's working it by himself, figuring out the one-man show thing. And the more we talked about things and he would ask me for my opinion and that kind of thing, it would lead to me kind of telling him some different things about kind of me and the kids while he was deployed. And then he'd be like, really? And then we started having conversations about things that we'd never had conversations about before, because when they're deployed, I go on about my business at home with the kids and he's doing his thing. And I don't really know what he's doing because I can't really. And I'm not telling him everything that's going on back home because I don't want him anything negative. If the kids got in trouble at school or something like that, I don't want to share that with him because then he's taking focus off what he needs to be doing downrange to keep himself and his guys safe. So there was a lot that we never talked about. So it wasn't that we were avoiding it. It's just when he would come home, it's like, great, we're done with that deployment. Now we can move on together. And so we would just move on and things just weren't talked about. And when he started writing the play and we were talking about things and he would say something about the family back home and I'd be like, oh no, that's not how it was. And then I would kind of tell him, this is kind of what we went through. I could share things then because he's not deployed anymore. And we started having conversations that we had never had before. And it was actually really cool because I think I felt a closeness to him like I had never felt. And I thought that I couldn't feel any closer to him. And it was because we were communicating about things we'd been through in the past that were coming out in this play. And now we were able to actually put it out in the open for other people to be able to come and see and learn about and be able to talk about and have a different conversation when they left the play, when they came to see it.
And that's been the cool thing. Like when we met with you all in DC and you saw the play together and then we went, and hung out and you all were sharing some of the insights that you had as the story was told from the stage. And that's, I think for both of us has been so rewarding as we've traveled the country and done this work is how people listen autobiographically to the story we wrote and they locate themselves in it. And for us, that's the most rewarding thing in the world.
The play, tremendous. The conversations it brewed between us, and I see myself up on stage here, be like, wait, dude, how's he playing me up there, right? With all the stuff. Yeah.
It would be like one of us would randomly say something and go, wait, what are we talking about? The play. Oh, okay, keep going.
Yeah, because it was such
just
a
spontaneously hit.
just so authentic and it hits home. But on that of kind of how these team rooms got started, how the play got regenerated, almost 2 years ago, the withdrawal of Afghanistan happened, and you have not been shy about it, of the moral injury and how do we come back from this and how do we go forward
and what that's kicked up for people.
Yeah, and what's that kicked up? So if you wouldn't mind, hey, what did that kick up for you, right? Obviously you went in best-selling book and are helping so many deal with it, but it's a real raw injury.
I mean, honestly, and I'm being straight here. Like I wished I'd never had to write that book, and it derailed our business. It put the play on. Like there's so much that came out of this that was, we weren't ready for it. And I'm sure a lot of people on here could relate to that. Like they had things that came out of this that you weren't ready, and it just waylaid you. Well, that was the case for us too, and it still is. But what I will say is that when that happened, I feel like I have been pretty outspoken about this, and I'm not going to stop because in the course of my role as a leader of a nonprofit, as a storyteller and putting this play on, I have spoken to so many iconic Green Berets, special operations, NCOs, family members, Gold Star family members, and this thing wrecked them. The way this war ended, the way our institutional leaders bailed on our allies, it was wrong. It violated everything we were taught as special operators. It violated everything that we were held to account for. And it put me personally in a place that I felt like I was going back to that dark time. And Monty had to intervene along with some very dear friends of mine they had to intervene, like physically.
He was spiraling back down to the way he was when he first retired from the military and was in that really dark place. He was going back there.
I mean, I was working cases for evacuation. I hadn't showered in like 2 weeks. I was a piece of crap. And frankly, I'm 53. I'm not a task force commander. Like I was doing this on a Mac computer, for God's sakes. Like it was ridiculous. But yet we were managing commandos and special forces and Cascatejas, guys that all of us on this call fought with and bled with, and they were being left. And so it wrecked me, and it still does. Like I'm still trying to make sense of it. And I think the moral injury, the violation of what one knows to be true and right, is very, very fresh. And I personally believe that if our leaders in the special operations community don't get their head around this and don't step up and help lead through this moral injury, we've just seen the beginning of it. I don't think we're on the other side of it. I think there's a lot going on that our NCOs and officers are dealing with, and we need to come together as a community and figure this out, because it's not going away, and it's not going to. It's going to, you know, the recruiting problems and all of those things we're seeing, I believe, are a direct outcrop of this. So we're trying to use the play. We're trying to use our nonprofit, the Hero's Journey, and storytelling to be a bridge from moral injury to moral recovery, because I don't believe anybody else is coming, and we're going to have to do a lot of this ourselves, but it's going to take everything this community has got to move through this and not lose more operators and their families.
We were smiling because you're echoing again a lot of our story. And I know what we really have been empowered as a couple by the two of you is seeing how you have shifted your focus to, the what's next, and how do you refocus. And Monty, I'd love to hear your spousal perspective of, at this point, like, how do you refocus your efforts to kind of transition again? I feel like almost.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, how are we getting through this part?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like an whole nother transition. It spun it up again, right?
Yeah.
You said it. You almost got into that bad, dark place if it hadn't been for money and interventions.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, because he was going deep, dark again, and he had a raw mastermind that he was going to with some buddies, and I had reached out to a couple of them that were going to be there and just let them know kind of what's going on, because I knew that he needed to get pulled back out. We need to be a part of what's going on, and we need to still keep helping, but we've got to figure out a different way to do it, to where we're doing it together, and it's actually something that is possible. It's not trying, because it got to a point, it was hard to get him out anymore, and it was hard. And so the more focus he's putting on something that's getting really hard to do, let's refocus and see if we can figure out something that we could possibly do, and then get some positive things happening, and then it can kind of build you back up again.
In fact, you held the book up, but the one thing that Monty said to me, because I was so, and I know there's so many folks on here that were experiencing this, but I was so frustrated, and I'm like, I've got to keep going. Like, I can't stop. And Monty said to me, like, you don't have to stop, but you're not a ground force commander anymore. Like, that's over. What are the things you can do to make a difference? And we landed on it. It was storytelling. We can write about it. We can go on the news and talk about it. We can be advocates for our brothers and sisters that are on active duty and they can't say anything, bring the playback with Gary Sinise. Like, so that's what, and that was all her. Like, I was completely myopically focused on friggin' Signal chat rooms and walking around like the nutty professor in my underwear. Like, it was ridiculous. And had she not intervened and really refocused like she did the other time, I would probably still, I don't know what would happen. I don't even like to think about it.
Yeah, I laugh at the absurdity because I think many on the call know that feeling, right? And we were there, had the op send set up at the table, and for me, the moment became when Corrie, I was like, hey, people are dying over there. We need to help them. And she's like, she calls it my operator mode. She's like, get out of your operator mode, man. I'm like, F you, and she's like, what about our family? And I was like, oh, yeah, and she's like, your family needs you. It's been a few weeks now, and you haven't showered. Similar thing, walk around crazy.
I think at that time I was also in the midst of battling breast cancer, so I was also dealing with some of those struggles. And so I think I at one point said, there are more lives here that matter, than just those. And while those are important, you also have to look at the lives of the household. So I love that you guys came together and really found a way, to move forward together and move beyond those moments and transition again.
And those 30 minutes go very fast. Yeah. So I know we had our question in the chat. I don't want to take any more time from the next sprint. So Scott, Monty, we'll be back at the end with a panel discussion. But first, we're going to turn it over in the first sprint and go to Daniel Hance with the Catalyst Foundation and Dave Lucas, and the floor is y'all.
Hey, thanks, Herb. Hey, first off, Herb and Corrie and Scott and Monty, really appreciate the discussion there. You guys hit on a lot of things that I think are important to everybody on the call, especially those, you mentioned in there are some things that those of us that are still in can't say. And so when you guys say it, you get cheered from the sidelines, of course. And so we really appreciate everything that you guys do and the discussion that you just led for the last half hour. So really appreciate it. So a quick intro to myself. So I am active duty. I've been in SOF, specifically used to SOC for the last 26 years. Came in early '97. Just left 5th Special Forces Group. Herb wins for second best shirt of the night. So thanks for that. And now I'm transitioning over to SWIC, and I am very much not retiring. And so that's kind of the point. And I think that's why Kaylee asked me to come on here, because I've met a lot of folks on here through just, I don't want to say networking, more building relationships and just talking to people. And once you meet folks, whether you've been in the community for a while, whether you're looking at online, whatever it is, whatever your community is, the more you build that out, the stronger that I think you all are. And so they asked me to come in. And so we talked initially about, why building out your network is important, particularly before you need one. And, when we spoke the other day, this can come in many forms. We'll kind of call it, whether it's in person, in SOF, you kind of have one that you build out naturally throughout your career, right? And so that's something that naturally grows the longer that you've been in it. And then nowadays, for those that have transitioned out, I think the premier one is within LinkedIn. So as we're looking at those types of things, why are we on there? And I, for one, when I joined LinkedIn, I joined specifically just because I wanted to learn. I said, you know what, you're going to leave the service at some point, whether that's through retirement, whether that's through forced retirement, whether it's through death, if you want to hang on as long as possible. Either way, you're gonna leave and you're gonna have to do something else. So what do you want to do? And I realized that I had no idea what I wanted to do or how I was going to learn, what I was interested in. And I didn't want to wait until I was 6 months out to figure out what I wanted to do. So I begrudgingly made a profile, OPSEC, and hey, how do I do that? And then the more that I got exposed to things and I learned, and then I started meeting people and getting connected with folks. And then I actually developed real relationships. And those have led to a lot of really great conversations. The one tonight is a perfect example. And so being able to meet a lot of great people that not only help me in my current job within Special Forces, but also within, I'm sure down the road. But the real benefit that I get right now, and the thing that I love the most about it, is that I've been able to help a lot of people. And so whether people get out, I've sat with a lot of folks over the last couple of years that as they have they've left service for one reason or another. And I sit and I do out counseling with them and say, hey, what are you going to do? Well, I want to go work within, within X field. Okay. Do you know anybody in there? No, I really don't. Okay. Well, hey, I think I know somebody that does that. Let me link you up with them and kind of get you started down that road so that they're not starting from scratch. Right. And so that's been one of the main benefits. And frankly, I've selfishly gotten a lot out of it because I have real friends that I've been able to make and just expanded my I don't want to say expanded my network because that sounds too clinical, but expanded my my friendship ring out and have real people that in my life that I really enjoy and really enjoy having, and that we get to help each other, right? And the best time, especially for those that are still within the service, the best time to build out a network, and I guess I could say this for folks that are employed, is when you don't need it, right? Like, I'm active duty. I'm not retiring anytime soon. I'm about to start a new job here within the next about a month from now, and so I need nothing from anybody. And so that's a great time to build out that network, because it's a lot of fun. I get to meet a lot of interesting people, and it's led to a lot of really interesting conversations and frankly experiences. One of those relationships that I met was through a friend of a friend. Was a guy named Daniel Hance, who founded the Catalyst. And admittedly, I have not been through the program, so truth in lending, but I do know Dan, and he's a great guy and has helped a lot of people. And I know a lot of the guys that have gone through his program and have nothing but good things to say about it. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Dan and let him let the expert really talk the transition and talk some of the mill from one of the guys that has done it, the military to civilian world, and talk through some of the struggles and some of the specific benefits that SOF folks have when they transitioned out. So over to you, Dan.
Well, thanks, Dave. Checks in the mail. I appreciate all that. It's wonderful to be here with everybody. So bottom line, Dan, Daniel, you can call me Sally if you want. I've been called worse. But all of you know a lot more than what you realize. For those of you that are either in the process of transitioning out now, will be transitioning out, or have transitioned out, and you just haven't found what it is intrinsically that you want to do. And by the way, Scott, I took about a page of notes while you and Herb and Corrie were, and your lovely wife Monty were all speaking, and just to add into what I wanted to talk with folks about tonight. But the way you want to, what worked for me was kind of just taking a step back when I transitioned out, because I transitioned out after being a company commander and went to go work for Walmart in their junior military officer program. I moved 2,000 miles away from everybody, and I was all on my own, only to find out 3 months into the job that it was not what I had signed up for, and that was fun, but was very fortunate along the way to meet some amazing people. And for the first time in my life, I did what was at the time the hardest thing I ever had to do, which was shut up and listen. And that really helped me. But at the end of the day, say what you want to say about the military, but it's absolutely a business. It's just a unique industry. And if you're in this room, you're already a successful businessman or woman. There's some key steps and key ways of, to go about doing things a little bit differently. And there are some fantastic people out there that definitely want to know you. One of the things I would encourage you to do is to, get outside your comfort zone. If you don't like meeting people, if you don't like, if you've got your group, your core group of friends, and that's wonderful. You're gonna set yourself up for some long-term frustration. Believe it or not, don't pay attention to social. Well, excluding LinkedIn, don't pay attention to social media. The only social media I utilize is LinkedIn, and that's just because, as Dave and Herb and Scott were alluding to earlier, it can be a wonderful tool. But one of the things I found along the way was I was going at it all wrong at the very beginning. I was approaching it from, hey, I can, this is me, this is what I've done in the military, this is what I can do, blah, 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 blah. It was me. I was fortunate in that I had a gentleman who owned several businesses that I was able to build a friendship with. And one day he finally just pulled me into his office and said, hey, you need to slow your roll and come from a different perspective, and come from the perspective of what can I do for you, and be genuine about it. And really, because again, going back to the military, they teach us some great practices and truly world-class principles. But one of the bad things that they also teach us that oftentimes folks, and myself certainly, do is it's what can you do for me? When I kind of took a step back and saw how this gentleman operated and what it brought to his attention, it was, or brought to my attention, and I was able to see how successful he was. That's how he was with everybody. It was how he was with people in his personal life. It was how he was with people in his professional life. And it was genuine. And because of that, the gentleman was running a $200 million a year company. That was very eye-opening. And it took some practice. But then I was also fortunate enough to have another gentleman. Anybody ever heard of Centos? The small little cleaning? Yeah. So Centos was originally founded by a gentleman named Ray Farmer. Ray was a World War II veteran, Marine. He used to love that. But great gentleman, used to teach for us. But one of the things he told me one time was we were giving a series of talks, and he literally grabbed me. Now, mind you, he was in his 80s, and he snatched me up, and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, because I was talking about networking and the power that it has. One of the things that he told me was, if you notice, he's like, stop talking about networking and start focusing on relationships. And he just, in that moment, he's like, Dan, he said, amateurs network, professionals, we build and cultivate relationships, and then we cherish them for the rest of our lives. And then I thought about it, about everybody I had known that had been successful in the military, everybody that I was starting to meet in the civilian world that I deemed as, you know, that I had a ton of respect for and that were successful. They all carried that same way. And all of you have that trait. It's literally been physically been beaten into you a time or two, but more than that, you are the solution. You truly are. If you think about what you've been trained to be, you're problem solvers with advanced leadership skills. You're able to come in and work through diverse teams. You're able to work, you know, you really don't care about XYZ extrinsic fit factors. You focus on the intrinsic. That carries over. I was fortunate enough to have two meetings this morning with a couple of entrepreneurs that one owns a company that's doing about 80 million a year. The other one's doing about 600 million a year. And both of them told me, they said, Dan, the reason we love working with you is because you always introduce us to leaders that are just phenomenal people. And they're like, you just don't find that on a regular basis. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, you do. You just, they're here, they're your neighbors, but folks don't know how to talk to one another. That's where getting outside your comfort zone is. And truly, you know, being open and being vulnerable, and as Scott said, you know, willing to share your story, because people absolutely want to know it. You know, and this is your opportunity to, and take your time. This is not a sprint. This is something that you can be anybody you want to in this day and age. If you're semi-competent and you're a good person, you can be anybody you want to be. As long as you continue to utilize that grit factor. So both Forbes and, is everybody familiar with Heinrich and Struggles? If not, you're the type of people that they look for, but they're probably the world's premier executive recruiting headhunting firm. Bottom line, both of those organizations did independent research of one another between 2016 and 2018. And they said, who were the most successful Fortune 500 CEO or C-suite executives? So CEOs, COOs, CMOs, and then entrepreneurs in the last 50 years. Anybody can guess the common background of who those folks are? All of you, former military leaders. And it wasn't necessarily the generals. It wasn't, you know, the 5-star sergeant majors. It was actually everybody from E5s all the way up to lieutenant colonels and colonels. And what they found was the number one factor or skill set, they said, that separated these folks and their success was grit. Every single person on this call has grit and more than enough to spare. Additionally, we're less likely to be embroiled. We're 83% less likely to be embroiled in ethical controversies, and we're also we're 2.5 times longer in average tenure in those positions than our civilian counterparts. Again, that all comes back to, you know more than what you realize, and it also goes back to why the right people want to hear your stories. So as you're getting out, and you know, what I would just suggest is, as you're getting out, you're meeting these folks, be genuine. But anytime you feel like you're forcing something, you don't have to. That's also know when not to pursue a relationship. You know, everybody knows that the word of mouth and how that works. You also know how to read people, and that's a skill set that, quite frankly, most folks don't have these days. If it doesn't feel right, something seems a little off, vet it, and you do. But if it comes up and you're saying, nah, this isn't good, don't pursue it. That's just as important.
Dan, real quick, just a question from the audience was, how do you balance like cold bumping, just reaching out, cold calling, networking versus, you know, managing your existing relationships? Could you hit it on that at all? For Scott Moore asked it in the chat.
Absolutely. No, thanks. Yeah, so I did it to her. I reached out to him. I read his book. I laughed quite a bit and reached out to him, and just asked him. I said, "Hey, this is me. Would loved your book. Told a lot of people about it. Would love to have you come in and talk to our candidates." And he was very gracious and has come on a few times and done that. But if you come in from a perspective, again, going back, and it sounds cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason, because they tell the truth. They work. If you focus on being that change that our small world needs, people will catch on to that. And so, for me, it's everything from, I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll look at people and I'll see what they've accomplished. And if it's, I can learn from anybody, but if it's people that have a common, there's common threads there, or they have a skill set that our candidates can learn from, I'll reach out to them and I'll flatly, blanketly tell them, "Hey, look, you are an expert. I am not. We would be honored to learn from you and work with you." But another thing that I always try to focus on, again, going back to what can I do for you, is we always try to do something to give back to those individuals and those organizations. So it can be, we do consulting projects for companies. It's a way for our candidates to learn industries and organizations, and also create career paths for themselves that they wouldn't have otherwise. But it's also it's a way for them to showcase their immense talent, because again, all of you know a lot more than what you realize. With that, for what we do is we focus on trying to bring an opportunity to exhibit talent, which is something that, again, you're all experts at. And so we also make sure that we don't, you try to always not to leave anybody behind. But one thing that you also have to be cognizant of is, as you're becoming this next, this new person, without denigrating your past, you will separate yourself from some of the folks that you used to be close with. That doesn't mean that you can't still hold them dear, and you can have, you can still, I've learned to love from afar, is what I should say. Learning to, hey, I might only be able to contact or have a conversation or hang out and grab beers if it's beers, twice a year. But the reality is that, what I've learned is there's a lot of people out there that I've met in the last 7 years in doing this that I would have never have had, previously thought I had anything to do with, that actually taught me a lot. And they were people that made me better just by being around them. And so while I certainly wanted to keep those relationships, you have to know when to trim the fat. And so I would just, that's different for everybody. So I just implore you to, stay true to yourself, and if it feels right, keep doing it. If it doesn't, don't.
That's all. Yeah, that was perfect. And we thank you for all of that information. I know authenticity is something that's a big topic in our household, and we can certainly appreciate that. And also really love, what you said about reaching out to people. I personally always encourage people to lead that with an ask for information about the person that they're reaching out to. It's human nature to love to talk about themselves. So it's always easy to get into that relationship by allowing them the opportunity to share first. Herb?
Yeah, no, thanks, Daniel. Sometimes we'll call you Sally just to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
And thanks, Dave, for bringing the Catalyst Group in here and talking. And it is, you just got to reach out, right? It's as Corrie said, people love talking about themselves, and that's the exact opposite of probably all of us on this phone call, right? That where our community is like, we are not going to talk about ourselves. So it's a big changeover. And
as Herb says, feelings don't have to be talked about every day, do they?
Yeah. Apparently some people like to talk about feelings, but anyways, we digress. Turn it over, go flip over to our second sprint here with David and the team from Return to Duty. So I'll give you all the floor and we'll sit back and listen.
Thank you, Herb. Appreciate it. I just wanted to say thank you to the entire SOF team for obviously welcome us into this circle, if you will, and then everybody else that's joining us on here. either with their respective areas of specialty or even just joining in as an audience. I got to confess, I didn't realize the therapeutic value that this was going to be. Candidly, I think I was, just trying to make sure that I don't screw things up for our organization and our mission. And the beauty is I know I've been sitting here jamming out a whole bunch of notes, and I just tell you, I really appreciate the fellowship. It's very much needed. So as far as return to duty, the story on it is, like you said, I think it's touching on things that Scott said, Herb said, Dan, is that it was kind of born out of our own trying to transition. My story is I'm actually technically still an 18 Delta, but I'm with 20th Group. I'm part of that goofy group that's straddling the fence, can't make up its mind. I serve in the performance wellness unit that's recently stood up down in Florida. So it kind of complements what I do in my civilian career now for the last 6 years, working as a clinical education manager in endoscopic spine surgery. And but it allows me to kind of stay, if you will, relevant, so I can understand the needs of what's going on with some of our service members between, injuries as well as transitioning. I think it was a great program for them to put that together. Of course, the Guard was the last one to get on board with doing it, but better late than never, as we say. But it's been very educational, and it's allowing, like Dan was saying, to tap into a network. And the beauty is I had no clue of how beautiful it would be starting to be able to have the therapeutic value of stretching out beyond my normal circle of comfort within just mostly mill and interagency and government stuff, and a lot of the mentors that have come along the way from the civilian side of the house. So the story behind return to duty, I'll start out first. What our mission is we recognize that spine care in and of itself is a very subjective, more subjective than most specialties of medicine. And given that most service members, most everybody on this call that's worn a ruck or jumped out of a plane or whatever else, understands that you literally and figuratively are carrying the weight of our national defense on your backs. I don't know many people that ever get out of a career alive, however long or short, without some form of injury. The problem is, I think that it is kind of, taken as a cultural notion that you just deal with it, and whether it's through alcohol, prescription pain meds, or illicit stuff or whatever it may be, that it's just kind of a given, and it's kind of in the back of your mind, and we focus on other things that need care. And the problem with that is that I had my own injury in Afghanistan in 2010 and stayed loaded on Toradol like a lot of our guys will, so I can continue to keep making mission for several more months until I came home, and they were about to do a multi-level fusion on me at Eisenhower Medical. And it was only because of my own stubbornness that I raised the flag, if you will, to my battalion surgeon, good friend. And I said, hey, in 14 days when I do this, how's this going to impact my career? It's like, well, technically you're getting a multi-level fusion. So you're not going to be able to pass your halo and dive physical anymore. So that's that. And I said, basically, well, now that I know I'm not doing that, and I kind of laughed, and I said, what's my other options? And at the time, it was kind of, well, nobody really pushes back. And I said, well, I just kind of want to know what my options are. Long short, I ended up being able to negotiate, if you will, that I could take the long road to recovery. I'm glad that I did, but I didn't realize it was planting a seed at the time that years later, when I would transition, away from government service, last of which I think was over to State Department. But I would find myself wanting to parlay my passion for patient care and teaching, and I found it working for the endoscopic spine company. Well, I didn't realize I was opening my eyes to a lot of surgeries and options that I wasn't presented with, and I know a lot of friends have not been presented with, and it begged the question. So the interesting part was, as little did I know, I would end up finding myself recruiting a lot of other transitioning 18 Deltas and PJs and stuff like that that actually want to come over and start working in a career field that basically didn't involve body armor and a rifle anymore, and being able to still help with quality of life medicine rather than basically a lot of times the horrible sides of humanity that we usually would find ourselves dealing with in emergency med. Well, something that was kind of cool that Scott mentioned, I mean, Herb, Dan, everybody's been mentioning, I think this is just, was it, we didn't even realize it at the time. I remember, like everybody, like 9/11, you remember where you were when you sat there and watched everything falling. If you weren't in country, whenever everything fell in Afghanistan, I was sitting in Hartsfield Airport, transitioning from one surgery case that I was covering to another, and trying to basically start the journey, like many of us, to reconcile, okay, why did I just watch my oldest daughter grow up in picture? How many brothers and sisters we buried? How many friends of ours, Afghan commandos and whatnot, right now are currently stranded, and everything that's going on? And I didn't realize that when we created Return to Duty, which started out informally, just referring friends of ours within the SOF community who had been avoiding surgery to start going to this highly vetted elite network of surgeons who were the best of the best when it came to returning pro athletes, Red Bull athletes, whoever it was, to their top form, understanding they were dealing with a different creature as a whole when it came physically and what the expectations were. So what we found was, all of a sudden we said, we're going to stop doing this informally, and it turned into a formal relationship. We needed to do something positive. We needed to have an outlet instead of working for whatever mission that we were giving abroad. We knew that undoubtedly leveraging our unique skill set, being the longtime blue collar medics, if you will, always serving as that bridge between the other knuckle draggers, the next level of specialty care, that have now in our newfound passion and our expertise in spine care, if we were being able to still serve as doc on the team, to be able to connect them with trusted and vetted surgeons anywhere on the globe, but especially throughout the United States, that somehow in some way, if we were helping another brother or sister standing at that fork in the road like I was, and many of our teammates that make up our team all have previous spine injuries or surgery, that somehow we were doing something that for the rest of our days, we had no doubt that it was a worthwhile mission and carrying the torch. And if somehow it would outlive us in legacy and somebody else would keep it going, we were doing something right. I'm proud to say that we have helped right now, probably since we formalized, anywhere between 20 to 25 patients. We have 2 more next week. One will be in California, and another one will be in Florida with an endoscopic procedure, an artificial disc in California. And with that, I just want to go ahead and turn it over to Coach Dr. Bott, who is with Disc Spine out in California with Dr. Mesiwala. Brother, if you would like to share, some of the good things that you guys have been doing with us, and let me shut up for a second.
Hi, I'm Monty Mesiwala. I'm a neurosurgeon here in Southern California. I've had the honor and privilege of working with many people on this call for the recent past, and enjoy my time out at Fort Bragg with you guys in May. So, we're here really just to serve. I mean, I know it sounds like something you've heard many times before, but for at least, for me specifically, we have a pretty comprehensive and unique practice. We see a lot of people who I consider to be similar to special operators in that they're professional athletes, and they demand a lot from their bodies, and we expect them to perform at a certain level. And they have access to care that many of you don't. And so I happen to be contracted with most insurances, including TRICARE. So there shouldn't be any issues in terms of seeing us. I think it's just a question of, can you come out to California, at least where I am, and for other specialists throughout the US who are contracted appropriately, can you, get to see them too? In the end, there's always going to be some differences between providers, but I think all the people that are involved with Return to Duty have a certain level of competence and expertise. And so in the end, if you can find a surgeon and have a relationship with them that's built on trust, and you understand what you're having done and why, then your outcome will be great. And so we're here to serve, and that's what you've heard many times before, but I think we can back it up pretty well. And our goal is to get you back to doing things in life that you want to do, and the least invasive and hopefully the most advanced way possible. And sometimes that involves surgery, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes we can fix things in a way that makes a lot of sense, and other times you have to have the big ugly surgery that you don't want to have. But there's a reason and rationale for what we do and why. And I think that we can provide you with that level of care that you expect, and maybe that you haven't experienced before.
Very nice. Rochelle, would you like to talk about our intake process and how to run that with case management, just for folks' visibility? Thank you, Dr. Masuelo.
Absolutely. And I was going to say we should maybe even take a step back for those that it's their first time hearing about RTD, to make sure that they understand this is really a by, with, and through type of partnership. So as Dave mentioned, you know, he's been through the service, a brother, a sister. I'm going through everything with you all, and then transitioned into the medical device world and spine. And then from there, growing out really the professional network of real vetted out experts in care that are trained in minimally invasive techniques, motion preservation, and not just looking at a patient of what can be billed for, but like how do you approach the care for that patient in the most anatomy conserving way so they can have more options down the road. So that was really the foundation of kind of the philosophy of moving patients through the RTD pathway. So with that in mind, we've gone through and we've built out some intake infrastructure. So if someone comes in with back pain, you know, back pain is one of the leading causes of disability in the general population. So of course, given the conditions that you all are subject to, there's a big need there. A lot of people are suffering unnecessarily. So they come in, their cases are reviewed by a panel of expert surgeons through a virtual roundtable, and then the most anatomy conserving care plans that will get them to their recovery goals, their activity goals are presented. So that way the person is empowered to make the choice that's right for them. Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say the thing is that I'm glad that it was Rochelle who actually mentioned by, with, and through, because it's one thing we talk about. We have no desire to be anything but complementary to the existing system, if you will, that an active guard reserve SOF member, you know, trying to go through, or in our case, you know, we have a small patient population because we have a small team with limited funding. You know, as we grow that out, our intent is to be able to grow the patient population that we can formally be able to care for as well. But we recognize there's a limited number of spine surgeons, if you will, that are green suitors. They're very saturated, administrative, command, leadership, let alone trying to run their practices and everything else like that. So basically look at it very much, you know, I hate to kind of use this analogy, but SpaceX does to NASA. There's a very complementary capability that leveraging the best of the best in the private sector, that if we can elevate the bar, we always pride ourselves in the SOF community as the pursuit of excellence. It's how we do our peer evaluations. It's how, as they say, you're always being assessed, you know, and if essentially what we're trying to do is foster a culture that's outcomes based, not solely billing and business, which you can marry business and medicine together. I think everybody knows some of those challenges, and even some of the challenges when it comes to TRICARE, you know, and being able to, you know, get patients, you know, the care that they need. And we recognize that's a long-term campaign, but we're also not going to delay getting the best and most relevant care we can for that patient who's in need now. You know, we have to basically be resourceful and looking at everything we can, because anyone who's ever stood at that proverbial fork in the road and you're dealing with spine pain, you're dealing with PTS, with TBI, with CTE, alcoholism, throwing the whole gamut, whatever it may be. The spine, unlike just like a joint or anything else like that, not to diminish those injuries, but is a very unique monster in the way that it sits on you and it resides on you and it grinds on you, and the debilitating factor. And so if the small part that we play at Return to Duty, having a bunch of folks serving in our team who come from the patient population, and the massive experts we have working in it, if what we are is an action arm, a very legitimate, unique of its kind action arm to be able to be there for our patient population and those that want to be able to help, you know, leverage us and us to do more. I think we're at the very much just at the beginning of this. I love how, you know, to reference, Scott, you said it yourself, sir, is that this is some of the best work I think I've ever done in my life. And it's because of, it's always the people. It's the people you're doing it with. They're beautiful. They're amazing. I am humbled to be with them, but it is the most meaningful. And I don't ever question or doubt whether it's substantive and meaningful and impactful for each patient that we go and help that was either avoiding care because of the horror stories that they've heard or whatever it may be. We've had instances, we have reports of marriages that have been saved, different dynamics that have been done, and you can all trace it back. So with that, I just say, I'm just grateful that if by this forum, we're able to reach more patients. I know our team is smiling, but we'll put it on our shoulders and we'll gladly keep taking more and keep growing our capability. So.
Please
If
go
I
ahead.
say something real quick, I think one thing that's the audience needs to understand too is that the neurosurgeons don't understand that we're lacking in care. That's something that blew their mind when we brought in the stones up. So we had neurosurgeons who are taking care of NFL athletes, neurosurgeons taking care of Red Bull athletes, top of the top, right? And they said, so when an operator gets injured, how long does it take an MRI? It's right on the base, right? You just take them back to get an MRI. And when we said, no, sir, that 6 months. And they were like, what? Yeah, 6 months. 6 months get MRI, 3 months get MRI. And these spine neurosurgeons who the top of their field, humbly, I'll brag for Dr. Mesiwala, top of their field, they don't understand the inequity that we're facing because it doesn't make sense to them. So that's the other arm, is that RTD is providing, and I'm not a founder of this organization. I came in late to just volunteer some time and network for them, but the advocating and fixing that inequity and the education to be the voice of the population is also really important, because other physicians outside this sphere, they don't get that we don't have this top level care. They see Navy SEAL, they see the commercial, they see the Discovery Channel video, they see operator, and they think that we have Elon Musk in our background building everything out for us, just to stay on the SpaceX thing. So that's something that's also really, really important to understand, is that they don't know. So RTD is bringing these top people in the field. And I don't know when the last time any of you had 6, 7 neurosurgeons look your MRIs together from across the country, but that's what these guys are doing. So I'll pass it off with that over.
Yeah, so this is Ali Mesiwala again. So just a quick thing. So it's true. I mean, most of the professional athletes we work with get multiple MRIs, but they get MRI every week if they need it, just because they don't feel like the last one they got was good enough, right? So you guys have the opposite problem, but really the issue shouldn't be whether you can get access to care or not. So you kind of have a back door into the system, if you will. So, even if you don't feel like you're getting the appropriate care where you are, or you don't feel like someone is hearing you, you have a mechanism by which you can at least get into the system. And so, I happen to be in California right now as we're talking, and I saw one of your colleagues yesterday who'd flown out from Colorado. And so even if you can't get your imaging done, even if your imaging is 3 or 4 years old, you have the ability to get it to us. We can start that process. And then because so I'll use TRICARE as an example, because I'm contracted with TRICARE, I can always order the additional studies for you. We can generate a report, we can do whatever we have to do, and that expedites your care. So once you're in the system, or once you see a specialist, or you have one of us access your records, the rest of it's pretty easy. And even if I'm not the one doing your surgery, as long as I can figure out what you need, we can direct you to someone locally who's more than capable of dealing with your problem. And, if you don't have TRICARE, if you have another insurance, some of you are, multiple insurance plans, then, we'll see you through a different means. But in the end, right, irrespective of what that is, you have a way to get in through the system, or past the system, or around the system. And that's really one of the advantages of RTD. So I would use that to your advantage as best you can, because it costs you nothing. And oftentimes, just sending your reports to us, the films, we can assess something very, very quickly and give you an answer in a few minutes.
I'm going to give you the hook. We're running out of time there. So all good stuff. One thing, though, there is a further deep dive in the chronic back pain, because as we can see, there's not enough time to talk about this, right? So we do have a further deep dive, 29 August, 7 to 9 p.m. East Coast time. There will be a deep dive. Check out social media, similar to this event. Yeah, right there. Hey, what do you know? Look at that. It pops up right when you talk about it. That's going to be a whole episode on back pain. But I'm going to call a quick audible because somebody gave me the keys to drive, so I got it. Our friend, Major General retired John Davis, hopped in here, and a lot of my good back pain advice has actually come from John, and we can't sit and talk too long because both of us have messed up backs. His has been a little better corrected. John, would you want to share briefly anything a little bit about your back? Hey, first, thanks for joining us, but then any kind of, what you'd share with me about how you're feeling a lot better now.
Hey, thanks, Herb and Corrie. Thanks for inviting me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for all that you do, both those who served as well as those who take care of us. Listen, back in 2007, I got to the point where I couldn't sleep anymore. I went to the doc and said, "Doc, I need drugs." And he said, "Hang on." Sent me to Walter Reed. I went to the pain management clinic and they did a test for me regarding whether or not I was a candidate for something called radio frequency ablation, RF ablation. I was. And I'll tell you, I've been doing that ever since 2007, and it has been very, very effective for me. So they stick needles into your spine. It doesn't hurt. They deaden everything. They stick needles into your spine, get it right next to the nerve that's being crushed by your spine because of the degeneration. They zap it with RF energy and it deadens the pain until it regenerates. So I just I don't know if you all are candidates for that. If you're experiencing, the same thing that I was, I would definitely check it out just to see if you're a candidate. It's worked marvels for me. So I offer that to you all.
Hey, John, I really appreciate Corrie and I, we appreciate you joining in and sharing there a little bit. So I call a little audible to give you a couple minutes because we love sitting and talk with you, and then you and I will get restless and be like, "Oh, our backs," and we have to get up. So
I joke that you guys could sit and talk for hours, except you really can't. So you have to stand and talk for hours. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Corrie and Herb. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
Thanks, John. Now that we've taken care of our back pain, or we at least have a plan to do that, let's make some money. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah. Well, maybe make Corrie money because it's, Corrie seems to be on the life insurance.
We have a plan. You definitely have to be the one that goes second, but over to you.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I'm Sarah Bumgarner. Thank you, Herb and Corrie, for the introduction. And I'm going to talk a little bit about money. And this has been such a unique and really special opportunity to be able to come into this SOF team room and talk to everyone here. Some themes here as I'm a certified financial educator instructor. A little bit about me. I was a military spouse for 11 years, and I have a deep passion for helping those who are transitioning from service or who have transitioned from service that might not have done it very well to get on better, sound financial footing. My goal is really, and I would love to talk to every service member before they leave the service so they understand what they're going to lose and how they're going to replace it financially. And there's a bigger kind of notion there in that when somebody leaves the service, as you all, about 40% per the poll have already transitioned from service, there's a lot of physical and emotional things that are happening to a service member. And if you add a financial pressure to that, it just can be a catalyst. So if somebody can leave the service on sound financial footing, then they can have the moment to take that moment to say, now I can think about the physical and the emotional things that are happening in my life. And I can talk with my spouse about that. And we can take a breather to figure things out instead of transitioning from service into a job, to just have a job, to make money, to be able to kind of do a daily grind that might not be giving you purpose. It might not be helping you, but hindering. So when we talk about finances, there's a bigger conversation that's there. And a lot of times I go into certain units and I'll do a full brief of all of the things you're going to lose financially when you transition from the service. Today, I'm going to talk about kind of some high level things here. I am going to share my screen, which is a little bit different in this conversation because we are talking about money. It helps to see things laid out a bit. So I'm going to screen share this. Hopefully everybody can see that. And of course, right, we're talking about money. So I do have to just say that this is not legal or tax advice. I leave all that to the lawyers and the accountants. But I want to go through a few things because this is one of the most startling statistics and facts that we have. is that when somebody is leaving our military, the majority of people are leaving, they are not retiring, and they are leaving service with less than $500 in their pocket, half of them. And this is from Military Family Advisory Network. Even those who have retired from service have left with less than $500 in a saving or an emergency fund. So if somebody's leaving the military and they're going through this huge life event with their family and they have less than $500 in their bank account, they are probably not going to be in a really good mental place just based off of that. So it's one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about this, and I'm passionate about service members understanding their finances before leaving the service, is because it is a real problem. And even for those who have left the service, and especially those in the SOF community, you always take care of your own, right? So if this is information that's new to you and you think other service members need to know this, then that's great. Share it. One of the first starting places when you transition from the service is there's a big misunderstanding between our military versus civilian pay, right? There's about a $45,000 swing in just benefits that you're getting when you're on active duty. Things like your BAH and your BAS and special duty pay and taxes based off a home of record that all go away. And this is a really good starting place to understand that. And maybe you transitioned from service and you didn't understand that, and all of a sudden you didn't realize I'm getting paid the same amount of money, but now I can't afford to pay my bills in some way. So that's one of the really important baselines that we have here. One of the next things I want to talk about, because when we talk about how are we going to save money, how are we going to invest, how are we going to retire in our next retirement, right? A lot of service members go from retiring to second career. Actually, I'm going to throw that question out there. How many people have transitioned from service and are having a second career? Or how many of those think you're going to transition from service and have a second career? Drop it in the chat box, because I always like to kind of take a pulse check on that to see kind of how the conversation goes. But one of our fundamental things is a budgeting rule. It doesn't matter if you make $50,000 a year or you make $500,000 a year. If you can break your money down into these 3 pillars, then you are setting yourself up for success. It's 50% for your needs, 30% for your wants, and 20% for your savings and debt repayment. And so having this, right, and knowing this knowledge before you leave the service, you're at an opportunity to be able to set yourself up for success, to have a conversation with your spouse and say, hey, we should be saving like this so that when we leave the service, we have a buffer. We are not $500 or less in a savings account. And we can kind of take a pause and take a moment to be able to level set ourselves through this big life event that's happening to everybody in the family, not just the service member. And so another one of the key things we talk about too is talking about credit, right? And understanding that the majority of people don't understand how their credit is made up. So how are you going to get great credit, right? How are you going to be able to have better interest rates on things? And it's by following this pattern here. 35% of that is your payment history, which means if you have a good budget, then you're paying things on time every time. So I'm going to just briefly kind of show some of these slides just for awareness, right, for what the cost is, because it's kind of enlightening when you're on active duty, right? You have these healthcare benefits, but it's not costing you anything. So now it's going to cost you something. So it's something that you lose. If you're retiring, then you're going to lose, you won't lose your TRICARE, but you will lose the cost associated to it, which was nothing. So you have to make that up. Something that we also want to highlight and that I talk about a lot, and sometimes people go, why on earth are we talking about, Medicare and Social Security? Is because a lot of times people don't realize when they retire from the service and they have TRICARE, when you turn 65, your TRICARE goes away. The only way you keep your TRICARE is if you enroll in Medicare and you then become under TRICARE for life. But the payment changes again. So here's another financial aspect that changes. And how it changes is it's now based off of your Social Security. So however much money you have made is now how much you are going to pay for healthcare. So at 65, you have another point of a cost variance there that's important to understand. One of the really big things that when we talk about transitioning from service that I wish every service member and their spouse would do is sit down and do a financial plan. Really sit down and understand where your finances are, understand how you're saving, understand what you're investing in and how you're investing. One of the ways that we can use investment tools here, and this is when we talk about how are we going to grow money, how are we going to keep money, is having that TSP. I wonder who in here, if you're comfortable, if you have a TSP, are you actively managing it? Do you know what's happening in there? Once you leave the service, that TSP will freeze, meaning that you no longer can contribute to it. So it just stays there. And you can either manage it or you can move it or roll it over. But understanding kind of a holistic approach of how are you investing? Are you investing in an employer fund? Are you investing in an IRA? What are you doing there? Are we doing a combination of both is really important to understand. And this is just a great slide that I just love because I'm kind of a nerd, and it shows you how each of the funds in TSP are broken out and shows you how you can diversify your money. Someone else here might be a nerd too. That's great. And this is really this is a plug for anybody who's still on active duty, and you might be in a leadership role and you might have younger service members in your units, is that everyone should be doing a matching contribution on the blended retirement system. You yourself might not qualify, but for the younger generation, they've got to do this 5% match. I love to show this to the younger kind of generation and show them that if you just do a 5% match, which you should be investing anyways, and this is at an E2, you're going to be getting $82 in free money. So if this base pay goes up, you can imagine that free money goes up. So it really makes a difference. And this is where kind of my passion in making sure that we're telling service members about things like this so that they are not caught in that 50% or that 30% almost of those with $500 or less. Another aspect is a spousal IRA. I always give a plug to the spouses. I was a military spouse for 11 years. I worked inside the home some of the time, just inside the home, and I worked outside the home some of the time. And a spousal IRA is something a lot of people overlook. When we talk about kind of, especially in the SOF community, when those service members, they're running sprints, right? Their deployments are like, they're just running marathons all the time, right? And they're home for short amount of times. And the military spouse is the one taking care of all the finances. They may or may not be able to work outside of the home. And if a spouse is not working outside of the home, they can still contribute to a spousal IRA, meaning that screen that I showed you that showed a 401k and an IRA, they can put up to $6,500 into an IRA of their own. And a lot of that can bring a lot of worth to that spouse to say, hey, what you're doing within the home and maintaining our home has a monetary value associated to it. And not only that, we're now just setting ourselves up even better for our long-term next final chapter, right? So it's something that's important to talk about as you are talking about a transition in service. Now, something that we're talking about a little bit earlier is life insurance. It's one of the big things that people don't realize that they're going to lose. I was really happy to see SGLI increase to 500,000 this year. That's awesome. However, military spouses are still at 100,000. That's okay. Maybe they'll increase that next. But one of the things that you lose is SGLI. And a lot of times we will have our AFMA members or talking to units and they say, well, I'm just going to get VGLI. That is a great option if that is your only option. That is what VGLI is meant for. It's what it was created for. But if not, there's some things to kind of think about, you know, and so just walking through a little bit of what that can be, right? Whether you need something to just cover you right now, where you're in your kind of growth potential of making money and you're bringing in income and you have small children, then you might need term life insurance to cover those costs. It's very affordable, it's a low rate, and then you get a lot of coverage out of that. Some people say I might want whole life insurance. And so this is a VGLI rate tables. VGLI was created for service members to say, hey, we realize that we are putting your physical and mental strain, uh, way more than the civilian population. Therefore, if you leave service and you can't physically qualify for other life insurance out there, then we should be able to cover you. And that's awesome. That is the point of EGLI, and that's great. But it gets incredibly expensive. So I just always encourage people that you're going to lose SGLI for you and your spouse. And if that's the case, then and you're relatively healthy, just call around any organization that's life insurance. Just start getting quotes, start calling, start making sure that you have enough to now protect your family, because that's going to go away. And you can see that it does get incredibly expensive as you get older. And whereas commercial life insurance, right, it just stays the same. You pay one premium and that's what you pay for however long. And kind of why is that important for those that are retirees? I'm going to talk just really briefly in the last few minutes about SBP and about the benefit of SBP financially for your family. So it's something that you have to sit down with your spouse. If you have a spouse, you have to sign off on that to say, yes, we're going to take SBP, or no, we understand we aren't. And so some things to think about in that is that SBP is it's a benefit that is taxable, but it is paid. Of course, it's 55% of your military retired pay that is then paid to the spouse for the continuation of their life. That can be a tremendous benefit. It is taken with pre-tax dollars, so you get a little bit of a tax break on your retired pay. You're paid up, and there's no insurance and insurability, I should say, of that. Some things to think about, though, is that there's no return if a spouse dies first. There's no cash value to it, and that it's usually for spouse and children is kind of the benefits of it. So you can't leave it to an estate or something like that. But it's a really big conversation to have. This kind of gives you a little bit of the numbers and the figures of what that looks like. Just running a quick analysis of the cost of SBP and then the death benefit. And a lot of times people come to us and they say, hey, we don't know what to do. I don't know if I should pick SBP or I should pick life insurance. I say, I don't know either. All I can do is I can tell you the numbers, and you sit down with your family and you figure out how you sleep well at night, because that is what matters at the end of the day. If you're how your spouse and how you sleep well at night. So maybe that's a combination of SBP and something else. Maybe it's a combination of other variables, but it's important. And I really wanted to make that because for anybody who transitioned from the service and you didn't elect SBP and you're now thinking, gosh, I wish I did. I didn't educate myself well enough to understand it. It's currently in an open enrollment season. So until January of 2024, those who didn't enroll into SBP, you can now enroll into SBP, and you can get that for your spouse or for your child. And they've only done this 4 times in the history of SBP. So if you fall into that or you want more information, a great place is to go here and to kind of calculate that. Lastly, very quickly, in the last minute, I'm going to talk about VA benefits. I will say one of the things that I feel that the SOF community does do really well when service members transition is they ensure that they get their VA disability ratings. I will say that that's something that's really consistent within the SOF community, is ensuring that they're leaving with an accurate VA disability rating. So that's really important. And it's more important too to understand about service-connected death. So a lot of times there's kind of some stigma around, I don't want to get a rating, I'm not as worse off as somebody else or so forth, but it's not just for you, it's for your family as well. So last few tidbits is to always please include your spouse or your partner and your family in this. When we're talking about finances and talking about transitioning from service, it's not just the service member, it's the spouse as well, it's the kids as well. It is a whole lifestyle change that's happening. And to take advantage of training classes, one of the best ways in order to get maybe the job that you want, right? You're following the advice and you're doing the LinkedIn. You might want to get certifications. And when you're on active duty, there's up to $4,000 of free money for certifications out there. So you can get a project management, a PMP, you can get a Lean Six Sigma certificate. You can get all these things that can really help you when you leave to be able to get more in a salary. And we talked about the LinkedIn profile and kind of the importance of that. That was awesome. And then, of course, doing a financial plan Or I always tell people, if you haven't even updated your power of attorneys or your wills, do that with a JAG office before you leave, because when you get the bill from a civilian attorney, you're gonna wish you had in essence. So it's going to kind of wrap up things here. Here are some partners of AFMA. PM ProLearn's a great organization that helps service members get those certifications through project management. ACP is a great organization for mentorships. If you're wanting to meet with somebody once a month and look over a resume and be able to make sure that you're doing what you can, they're a great organization as well. And then for our military spouses, here are some other ones that 12 million plus, and ACP does a mentorship just for military spouses. So always plug for our military spouses as well through transition. So I want to say thank you all so much for letting me talk today. I went through this very quickly, and I could probably talk for hours about money and dive more into things, but I thank you for the time today, and hopefully you walked away with a little bit more information than you had before.
Thanks, Sarah. We were just talking. We know a number of Gold Star, families and some other retirees. The person's passed, and just how much of a burden it is on them. Right? It's something we think is going to be okay, but we were just talking how it's we know so many affected by it. And it really impacts those left behind. So I really appreciate diving into that. It's something we don't usually talk about, right? Because it'll be there. It's fine. So. Time has gone super fast. It's been an hour and a half. Hopefully you haven't looked at the clock, and now everyone just looked at the clock because I said not to, and it's been an hour and a half. But now let's wrap it up. We're gonna have a little panel discussion here. We're back with Scott and Monty, and then our other host, our sprint, I should say here. First thing I do want to say is, and it was hit on a couple of the different, almost in every one of these actual sprints. And with Scott and Monty, I'll throw it to Scott and Monty first. You talked about Bo Eason, meeting him, NFL football player. Hey, bridging that divide to our civilians out there. That gap between our military, especially our SOF community, and the civilian community out across our country. You want to hit on that at all, Scott? Like, what's your thoughts on that? Because that was something that came up to me when you're having a conversation earlier.
Yeah, just a couple of things that I'll just throw out there. And this is just something I learned in a 10-year journey here. I think that the quiet professional is a great mantra when you wear the uniform and you're serving. It ain't exactly helpful when you're going into the civilian world. Like, there's an aspect of it that's good, but I think it's become such a bastardized term that we take that to mean don't talk about yourself in the context of how you add value. And I don't think that's a good thing, number one. And number two, I think it's unhealthy spiritually, mentally, and physically. What I would just say is, I believe every single person on this call, every member of our military community has an amazing story. The brain makes sense of the world through narrative. We know this. This is how, whether you're doing an interview or you're speaking from the stage, or you're pitching to your boss, or you're trying to, go into academia, start a nonprofit, and talking to a bank, the listener across from you makes sense of everything that is said through narrative. And they're either going to tell themselves a story, or you can tell them a story, and it will pass through their membrane as the vehicle for ideas. And what I found is that we need to do a lot more work as a community on everybody that's transitioning, developing their story and telling their story every chance they get in the service of the person across from them.
No, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Yeah, telling those stories. And I've said before, like, quiet professional, but we become silent professionals, and it's to our detriment. But I also, like you and I've talked about, that's long term. Like, where's our country going if we don't tell the realities that we've experienced and share that? So
I think that was the key point for her when he realized that it was safe to begin speaking, and that the bridge there was really the more that he was able to share with the civilians, the more that they could potentially understand, what he's been through. And we love that your play is really focused on getting this messaging out to civilians. Can you talk about that a little bit?
One of the things Monty and I were just talking about when I was listening to the RTD folks talking, is, the way we've written the play is we toured 30 cities, and in every play performance, we do a talk back with the audience, and the audience is really smart and they tell you ways to make the play better. And as I was listening to David talk, I thought, when we talk about the inequity with care, and I thought, man, Lynn and Danny, the two protagonists in the play, need to have a conversation about one of Danny's injuries as he's come home from a deployment and the frustrations that he's having. And this is how we've written the play. So I want to reach out to RTD and find out how we could, build like a 3 or 4 minute scene where that dialogue happens, and we can make the point that these amazing docs made tonight and demonstrate that inequity through storytelling. And then it would, it could make its way into the talk back and stuff like that. So that's kind of how we've done it, right? Is how we've brought stuff like this to light, is putting it into that kind of storytelling. And then it's on people's minds as they drive home.
And the other thing too with the play is that there's a lot of civilians that feel like, oh, it's a military thing, I don't need to see that, I won't understand. But in actuality, in a lot of ways, it was written more for civilians than it was for us military people, because it helps them to understand. And that we hear in the talkbacks as well, is like civilians are like, wow, I had absolutely no idea.
Especially with what the military family goes through.
No, I love that. I also want to throw it to Dave, because I think Dave is an anomaly, who is a, leader in our community, still active, about to take over another battalion, but he's out here and engaging outside of the military community. Dave, why the heck did you do it, man? Why are you doing what you're doing?
Herb, I tell you, it was completely by accident. And that was, trying to stick to time earlier. I started off trying to learn, then I made one connection and had a real conversation, and then that led to another and to another, and then just kind of snowballed from there, right? And the thing is, I'm sitting there listening to you and Scott talk, what I'm thinking about specifically for RSOF, right? Nothing, being in RSOF is not secret. Being in special forces, being a SEAL, being whatever, like I just saw on Facebook today, the 5th group change of command, right? And with full pictures, like that's not a secret. And so the and what Scott was talking about earlier, some of the things that make you and the SOF attributes, right? Those are the types of things that are not secret. So that when you talk to people and you're whether you're providing value, whatever you're doing, sorry, you can probably hear my golden retriever going crazy in the corner. It's real life. These are the types of things. These are how, when you talk to people about, hey, there was a question earlier about how do I approach somebody? Well, it's easy, just like you do anywhere else, right? You don't go sit in, and I put it in the chat earlier, you don't go sit down and talk to somebody and say, hey, here's me, here's you, here's what I need you to do for me, but just developing that real relationship. And but to your question, Herb, it's I don't talk about anything that we do operationally. I talk about you see it, it's fairly generic, but I've had a lot of really good it's kind of what's on my mind. And there are things that I admit that when I started being a little bit more vocal, I was very nervous about, hey, how will this affect my career? It hasn't. And nobody wants to be, I'm sure some people somewhere say something, but I've had more positive feedback. I've never had anybody say anything to me, to my face or anything like that. And I've had more people either message me or pull me aside in person and say, hey, I really like, I appreciate that. And so that just encourages me to continue to do what I'm doing, as well as the best part again is just being able to help guys as they transition. So thanks, man.
That's great. I think, wish John Davis were still on the call. Unfortunately, he had to jump to get to some other responsibilities. But in our conversation one day with him, he shared a story with us, and he gave us some really interesting information about a mission that he had worked. But at the end of it, he said, I didn't tell you anything that was, compromising anything. There was no secret information. There was nothing I, divulged there that I couldn't share with anyone. And it was such a cool way that he kind of did it. And we were kind of talking about the power behind having conversations and the therapy, much to what David said earlier, that comes from that. And I know Monty and Scott have echoed as well. For you, it's kind of I'm curious about the fact you haven't yet transitioned, but do you feel like you're setting yourself up, for success in that transition ahead of time with this?
Yeah, it's been a weird byproduct. I've actually gotten numerous job offers that, of course, I've had to turn down. But it's nice to know that if I needed something, then I could go to something, right? Because I always want to be going to something, not running from something. And so, it's been, that wasn't the goal, but that's been a byproduct that I think is, it's obvious. If I said no, it's not, none of this will help in the future. Well, obviously it will. But that's not the reason for it. I've legitimately enjoyed it, but at the end of the day, yeah, it will be helpful because we're only as strong as as our network in the military and out of it.
Great.
Yeah, one of the cool things for me is it doesn't matter if you were SOF or you were operator or you were SOF support. I don't care if you were a cook. Once you're out, we're all the same, right? And we work together, and it's not a civilian versus veterans or civilian versus active duty or whatnot. It's, hey, we're all Americans. Let's do this together. One thing that kind of stuck out earlier in the chat is having been a fan of my back pain, not a fan. David, I know there's return to duty. We got the website. What would be your guidance and recommendations? Where would someone start? Like, hey, I know I have back pain. I've had it for 10 years. Where would someone start with that?
Especially when they're already overwhelmed and have heard the horror stories.
Yeah, it's an interesting part is that, in our approach, the way that we do it is candidly, we have front loaded getting the patients taken in, if you will, their information so that we can get them triaged. It's funny, we fall back on what we know. The same thing is as we were a mass casualty or anything else like that. We right now with our bandwidth, with our staff, basically working full-time jobs and another 40 hours, if you will, doing return to duty stuff, we basically, we triage. And so what we will do is do our patient intake with no PHI or anything else like that. It'll come through. We will have the team goes through, screens it. From there, we can stack and rack in terms of where that patient needs to go, going ahead and getting it before this expert panel, a virtual table. And at that point in time, we allow the round table to come up with option A, if everybody agrees with A, or options A, B, and C, because it's anonymized, the information when we put it before these physicians. And the beauty is when we come back, we basically were able to offer that up to the patient, the case manager will. And this is beauty. There's not really another place this is replicated anywhere in the US that I know of, that you have this caliber of physicians and surgeons look at it, and then you now are empowered as the patient to go, hey, I'm interested in the pros and cons of either A and C, let's say, for example. Now I want RTD. Can you guys help put me with that respective surgeon who wants to basically make their case on X, Y, and Z? And we'll go, excellent, cool. We'll connect you guys, and then you can hear the case presented to you. Now, one of the things our goals are, we have some patient education material links to a group called the Endoscopic Spine Research Group, which is an invitation only. They're all objective, and most surgeons, will even joke on it themselves, do not like having their peers look at their body of work, if you will. But what they do is to be a part of the membership of this group. One, you have to be willing to learn a very challenging skill set, if you will, to do this type of surgery on patients through the size of a number 2 pencil, or through a straw for that matter, anywhere from the cervical, from the neck all the way down to the sacrum. But you have to also have hit a certain threshold of cases and volume that you've done and expertise, if you will. It's kind of like being in our community. And the cool part is that from there, they will actually lay out also in their own fashion, a virtual roundtable of studying the best practices, who's doing great, outcomes driven, and everything else. Well, this particular group is a core component of the return to duty network that we have. And they can't donate their way in, they can't buy their way in. It's the same way as our SOF community. you have to basically be vetted and earn a slot to be a part of our community. So they actually have material that we could send somebody to click on if you want to learn about some of the common, issues, complications, challenges with the spine. And then it's very concise. They did a great job with the graphics and the images and stuff like that, so that you could go through and become self-educated. And we help to curate that. And then from there, once you say, hey, I've got this going on, you definitively have a problem, you can go ahead, do the patient intake form, and we will take over. But the beauty is it's kind of a continuous thing where you can get educated, you can have advocacy, you can have networking. You can jump in and move out, however it is, whatever's best, and a la carte for you. One of the things that I can't help, shamelessly throw this kind of a cool moment we had one day sitting once again on a little, Zoom call like this, but I think we had I think it was 7 to 12 of some of the best renowned surgeons in the country, not just based on cool, hey, name and how much money they make. No, legitimate outcomes based. The people, when their back is against the wall, pro programs have franchise money on the line. This is who they go to. And we sat there and laughed and looked, and I was like, somebody sent me a text like, hey man, do you know the hourly rate right now for this Zoom call would probably be somewhere between $75,000 and $100,000. And they're all doing it pro bono because they don't look at our patients. And I hate to say this because I know it's not everybody within the military treatment or the VA system. I promise you, we know that. But because there is kind of an element of, oh yeah, it's another service member in some places. And it's almost kind of like that old Dunkin' Donuts thing. It's time to make the donuts. Whereas instead, with our patients and the network that we have, they're like, hey, these are high performing athletes. They may not be making the money of the entertainers, but we want to give them the best that we have, the same way we are doing for the entertainers and the pro athletes. And that's phenomenal. And so
I was going to say, a lot of people say that they're doing the Lord's work, but I think if you can get that many surgeons to come together and work cohesively, that is the essence of the Lord's work right there.
It's nice because it's very collaborative, and you see people, as Dr. Messiwala pointed out, it's a very, what I get chills when I talk about it. It's what you would hope is happening for all of us. We wish we could do it for everyone, but we recognize with our bandwidth, the limited funding we have, this is what we do. And so when you recognize you have these folks, whether they're in Washington State University or University of Washington, Vanderbilt, Cornell, Texas Back Institute, Disc Spine, Florida, wherever it may be, and they come together and they're doing these round tables, and you see them exchanging ideas and watching actually everything in the room get better, and how they're sharing and networking best practices, and even kind of in a collegial manner, being able to say, hey, you know what, so-and-so is probably better at doing that. I'm willing to swallow my pride and say, you should probably go to this part of the thing. And that's a cool win.
No, I appreciate it, Dave. I'm personally invested in the back pain, probably like many of us from the SOF community, and the deep dive, obviously 2 hours on that whole topic coming up August. I did have a question in the chat. I'm going to throw it over to Scott. When I'm building a story, what's the prompt questions? How do I get it going? How do I even know what to say? I don't know how to talk about myself.
So on that, I'll just hit a couple of things. And remember, every form of communication in the world is built around storytelling, right? They just did a study, David Phillips did, called Death by PowerPoint. And what they found was that in the average PowerPoint presentation, 90% of the content is forgotten by the audience within 30 seconds of you saying thank you for your time. And the reason is because you're engaging working memory, and it's not designed to remember it. The only type of communication that truly engages long-term memory is storytelling. It's primal, and it activates a primal response in the listener where they listen autobiographically and they locate themselves in your story. So when you're talking to an employer, when you're talking to your employees at an all hands, even if you're talking to your kid about your PTS, like, narrative competence is absolutely critical. And what I tell folks is the first thing we should start with as we start to look at our transition is your backstory. Your backstory is critical. Now, there might be 1,000,001 backstories that you have, but what I'm talking about is a story that you would tell someone in a high stakes moment to give them a sense of who you are in about 5 to 8 minutes, right? It's your backstory. And it's what people will automatically, they'll lean in, they'll listen autobiographically, their jaw will drop, and they'll go into a trance-like state as they listen to you, as long as it's told in the service of the listener and not this one time at band camp, right? And so the key to that is to build your backstory around a pivotal moment that happened in your life, a moment that was pivotal, decisive, defining. It doesn't necessarily have to be traumatic, but it does need to be pivotal, right? And so you were going along this way and this happened. What I found as a military community member and as a veteran, if it comes from your time in service and you can do a little pre-work on the place that you're going and talking to, and there's some alignment in that pivotal moment and what you went through, and it kind of connects to the organization that you're talking to, it's really even more helpful. But at the end of the day, don't worry about that in the beginning. Just think about a pivotal moment that happened in your life. It threw you in a different direction. How did you deal with it? How did you overcome it? How did you change, and what did you learn? That's it. If you do just that, you've basically written the hero's journey, which is the oldest form of storytelling in the world. Everybody knows it. And you can repurpose that into an elevator pitch, a keynote from the stage, or a job interview. And then the last thing I'll say is our nonprofit runs a lot of storytelling workshops and courses for free. And we also are about to unveil a digital storytelling course for free. And I'll work with Herb and Corrie and Kaylee to get that out. The only ask I have is, when we edited this thing, the editor, he thought it would be cute if he went out and got B-roll from the internet on military like actions, and they're so cheesy and terrible. Like, just please don't, like, just ignore that part, because the content's pretty darn good. So we'll get that out to you as well. But I would love to see everybody on this call start developing your backstory and get it ready, because people need it.
I, for one, am super excited about that. Herb and I took a trip down to visit both Monty and Scott, and Herb was able to sit in and have some really great conversations and really build out some key tips around storytelling. And I am super jealous because I got super sick. I had the travel sickness, with the tummy issues. So I was hanging out in the hotel for days, missing out on all the good stuff. So I'm super excited. I will personally be registering so that I can uncover some of that greatness.
No, yeah, I got to enjoy it, so it was good for me. I get to work solely on just storytelling. But before we wrap up tonight, I just want to say, hey, reach out, find Scott on LinkedIn, out there in the interwebs, find Last Out, find the hero's journey. I'm telling you, if you talk with him about storytelling, you're going to be able to tell your story, and everyone does have a story to tell. Reach out to the return to duty folks. Hey, back pain coming up again in the health sprint, the deep dive coming up in August, and the information was in the chat. And then same with Sarah. I know there was a chat about some, like, the difference of, hey, now I'm a veteran, what does some of that play into finance? So I'm sure if you reach out to Sarah, find her and the team at AFMA, they would go ahead and share. But I'm going to close it out for us, Corrie and I, and I'm going to turn it over to Kaylee. So Kaylee is just one of our favorite people, kind of a theme tonight. And she has started the Military Special Operations Family Collaborative. That's how this is here. So she's going to close this out, and I will give you the floor, Kaylee.
Thank you, Kaylee.
Thank you, Herb and Corrie. Thank you, everyone that led tonight. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't do it without the teams behind the scenes. But probably more than anything, we can't do it without feedback from the community. So one of the things our organization, the Military Special Operations Family Collaborative, was founded on was to build a living and breathing collaborative of families and vets and service members that served in our community, and tell us what they need. What health information do you need to hear? What are the resources that are holding you up, whether you're heading into selection, you're on your 12th rotation to wherever, or you're transitioning out, or maybe you're in year 4 after transition. and it's not going as smooth as you thought, and it feels like a marathon. And we like to hear from you, and we actually build these team rooms with you. If you've been with us since the fall, then you know we've changed quite a few things along the way, according to your thoughts and feedback. So reach out. There is a feedback form that you can find in the link. If you heard something, want a resource, heard an idea, loved the idea, want to make sure it comes to reality, hit up our team. You can hit us up here. You can fill out the feedback form. You can email home@msofc.org. And we aren't always fast, but we do listen and we don't forget, and we do eventually round back with the resources. And so take a minute and fill that out. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you loved about tonight and want to see more of, particularly in the future coming up in around November will be our final team room for this year. And let us know, do you want to hear a legacy topic, or do you want us to cover optimal performance? We're going back and forth between those two, and we always weave it a little bit, but you pick what you want to hear. So that's enough for us. Make sure if you have back questions, we build the deep dives around your questions. We want to make sure you know the research, you know right and left of what good looks like, that you get it straight from the doctor and you see where they get their knowledge and their wisdom from, that you can engage your family and your spouse in that conversation, and then you know exactly where to go to seek care. So if you have back pain, you have a back problem, you're looking for a surgery option, whatever it is, let us know and we will get those to you. We don't let questions go unasked with those deep dives at all. If you had a question tonight that didn't get answered, check out the blog afterward and we'll make sure to follow up with a response. So that's enough for me. Thanks for joining us tonight. We hope to see more of you in the future, and we hope you all enjoy the final weeks of your summer, get in a little bit of a vacation, some time with the kids, or good times with friends. So enjoy your downtime. If you are short on things to do, I have to put in a little bit of a quip for the book we just released. We collected stories from around SOF for 3 years, believe it or not. We collected pictures, and we wrote a book called The Warrior's Table. So if you go to our website, you can find it, you can order it. It's out in real life finally, and it's pretty amazing. So
if I may interject
Yeah.
there, it is amazing for a lot of reasons, but I personally love the pictures of her pre-beard where he looks like an NFL announcer. I really enjoy those. So
we do the whole life cycle. You see start to finish. That's what's so amazing about that book is it starts at stories before people even came to our community, and we follow them all the way after. So it's an awesome cookbook and storybook on what
it's beautifully done.
There's so much heart that went in that book, kind of like this team room. So thank you guys for everything, leading and contributing and coming with all you had. And we will see you in August and then again in the fall.
Not
Have a
everyone.
great night.
Thank y'all.
See y'all.
Bye.